This lovely manhwa is titled The Little Brat Runs Wild. If you love stories like this, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next episode. Her lady sat completely still, as if lost in deep thought. Her small hands were clenched tightly around her dress, and her teeth were pressed together. Around her, a maids whispered quietly, believing she could not hear them. They said she looked so pitiful, sitting there all alone. One maid murmured that the Duke was truly cold-hearted for being so harsh on her, especially when her lady's health was already so fragile. Another sighed sadly, saying her heart ached every time she saw the child like this. The head maid responded that this was exactly why she wanted to care for her even more, but her lady's terrible temper made it difficult. I mean, look at her. She's looking so scary, obviously very angry at this point. Daphne listened to every word and silently called them fools. As a mighty black dragon, there was no way she wouldn't hear the whispers of weak, lonely humans, but trapped in the small body, saying anything would be pointless. Besides, that man would be arriving soon anyway. When the announcement came that the master of the house had arrived, little Daphne stood up immediately. "He's here," she thought. She rushed angrily to the window, her emotions boiling over. And you might be wondering why she was acting so strange, so wild for a child. The reason was simple. She was once a great dragon, and everything she felt right now was because of that human. He was the lord of the Akion ducal house, and he was also the so-called hero who had driven out the black dragon. Daphne gritted her teeth angrily as she looked down at her so-called father, who had just arrived downstairs. The maid beside her noticed how eagerly she stared through the window and chuckled happily. She said her lady must already love her father so much to be this curious about his arrival. The maid gently suggested that they hurry downstairs to pay their respects now that her father had come. Daphne shot the maid a sharp glare. He's only the father of this body, she thought. Just the idea of him being her father made her grind her teeth in anger, her small face looking madly fierce. Anyone who saw her would wonder how a child could feel this bitter. Suddenly, Daphne threw herself onto the floor and began rolling around, throwing a full tantrum. She shouted that she didn't want to go see her father. The maids panicked and rushed toward her, trying to calm her down. They told her to stand up properly, but Daphne screamed no and stubbornly refused to move. In this fantasy world, there were 5 dragons believed to be fragments of the gods themselves. Each dragon guarded its own empire and was both worshipped and feared by humans. But beyond these divine fragments existed something far worse, an out-of-spec dragon. Wherever it passed, not even a single blade of grass survived. It was a completely ruthless existence that destroyed everything in its path. It was known as the Great Calamity. Selus, that was its name. Humans, elves, Ain, even all 5 dragons combined could not stop him. Selus was destined to remain the Great Calamity forever until he crossed paths with that man. The hero had aimed directly at Selus's left eye, where his core was hidden. There was no way a human should have known that. It was an undeniable fact. Before finishing the battle, the hero admitted it had been a hard fight. Then he raised his sword and coldly told Selus to die. Furious, Selus cursed him, asking how a worthless human could dare defeat him. In the end, the hero failed to kill Selus, but he succeeded in sealing him away for 1,000 years. Daphne still remembers clearly how the hero had said that when he opened his eyes again, all of his descendants would be out of breath. Those words sounded like a curse. Since he was born as a divine prophecy meant to bring ruin to the world, he was simply born to be a calamity. And now it feels unfair. So unfair and unjust that she had to go through all of this. One thing about villains is this: they are not born seeing themselves as evil. They don't believe there is anything wrong with what they are. Selus swore to kill the hero. Even if he was dead by the time Selus opened her eyes again, she promised she would wipe out all of his descendants. That descendant was the Duke. Flashback. The moment she opened her eyes after 1,000 years of sealing, rage flooded her soul. She awoke inside a coffin and immediately sat up, shocking everyone around her. People screamed and cried in fear at the sight of the dead rising. She had reincarnated as a little girl. Just like everyone else, she was confused. She stared down at her small hands, wondering what in the world was happening. She had been about to be buried, yet she suddenly came back to life. The servants panicked, shouting in terror as they witnessed the young lady awaken. Someone was sent running to call the physician, yelling that the young mistress had regained consciousness. They had no idea that the one who had awakened was not their little lady. It was the Calamity, Selus. Back to the present. Daphne was furious. She thought bitterly that she never should have become his descendant. It had been a week since she entered this body, but the fusion between her soul and the body took longer than expected. Because of that, she was weak and had only just managed to move properly. Even now, her soul felt far too heavy for such a fragile body. Suddenly, her eyes widened in shock. She stared into the mirror and froze. She looked exactly like that annoying hero. Daphne clenched her fists. She really did resemble him. I think she looks so cute with all these attitude. She let out an angry sigh, wondering why none of them had found it strange. No one suspected that her soul had changed. Not even that stupid hero himself. He clearly remembered the sharp, I don't care gaze he gave her on the day she woke up from the dead. He didn't seem interested at all. All he said was, "You're not dead, huh?" After that single sentence, he never came to see her again. Little Daphne found it strange. Sitting there with her cute face, she thought about how odd it was. This body belonged to his daughter, yet he treated her worse than a stranger. Aren't humans supposed to be emotional about things like this? So why was he different? She fell silent, then suddenly giggled in excitement. It didn't matter. This body carried the bloodline of the strongest swordsmaster and the Great Calamity. Oops, now she'll imagine all the trouble and revenge drama she would cause. Little Daphne thought to herself that with her centuries-old mana combined with this body, she was bound to become a transcendent being, one who could even reach the heavens. When that day came, she would make the hero bow before her as the head of the house. Then she would reveal the truth, that she was the black dragon he once sealed. Just imagining the look of shock on his face made her heart race with excitement. The thought alone filled her with joy. Yes, her perfect plan was simple. She would conquer this household. She giggled as she proudly announced it, then suddenly paused. Before anything else, she needed to examine this body properly. Ever since she entered this body, she hadn't been able to use magic at all. She could feel it inside her, but it was as if a massive dam was blocking it. Still, she didn't want to think negatively. She convinced herself it wasn't anything serious, probably just because the body was still too young. After all, the hero's daughter should at least have above-average stats. With that thought, she checked. And then she received the shock of her life. The stats were terrible. No. They were very terrible. Health, 10. Charm, 300. Strength, 1. Mana, 0. Traits, little brat, rude. A cold chill ran down her spine. Shocked and confused, little Daphne froze. What is this even supposed to mean? She wondered. At this point, our girl clearly won't be using magic anytime soon. She shouted angrily, demanding to know why the youngest daughter of the hero's bloodline had such miserable stats. Still in shock, she suddenly felt weak. She tried to hold back a cough, and then blood. Did she just cough up blood? Our girl stared at her hands in disbelief. Why? Blood? The maid screamed when she saw her and immediately shouted for someone to fetch the physician. One of the maids hurried to her side and begged her not to cough, saying it would strain her weak lungs. She asked why her lady was even lying on the cold floor in the first place. Annoyed, Daphne thought to herself that it wasn't like she wanted to cough. If it came out, she couldn't help it. Weak and helpless, she lay there, suddenly feeling that this situation was strangely familiar. As expected, even though she had been revived, that illness hadn't healed. She lay there quietly, hoping it wasn't what she was thinking. She could hear the maids whispering again, saying how pitiful it was, how she was such a beautiful young lady. In her heart, Daphne wondered softly, why me? Then one of the maids finally said it. She's terminally ill. Boom! Daphne's eyes widened in shock. What did she just say? At that moment, it felt like her soul almost left her body. Suddenly, a memory surfaced from decades ago. Selus remembered a man called the Great Sage, a loud, annoying fellow who claimed he knew everything in the world. He once spoke a ridiculous prophecy saying that she, the great Selus, would one day become a lowly creature. He talked so much nonsense that she got furious and threw him across the continent. She was fed up and didn't want to hear another word of his so-called prophecy. Angrily, she cursed him, calling him a bastard. If he truly knew she would possess this body, then he was the only one who might have clues. But the real problem was, why was she on a time limit? Furious, she shouted in anger and coughed up blood again, terrifying the maids. One of them cried out, "Duchess, please, I beg you not to shout." But our girl ignored her completely. Her mind was racing, her stamina was trash, her magic was even worse, and the only thing maxed out was her completely useless charm. She glared at the maids and demanded to know exactly what illness she had. They began to stutter, and her anger only grew. She yelled at them to hurry up and say it already. The first maid hesitated and reminded her that she hated hearing the name of her illness. Why ask now? Another maid added nervously that she would throw vases at them every time they mentioned it. Daphne sighed as she looked at them. She could tell the original princess had given them a hard time. This time, she told them she wouldn't do that again. The maids exchanged nervous looks, then finally spoke. They said it was called the butterfly disease. Black butterfly? Daphne repeated. If she remembered correctly, she had seen it listed in the World Disease Encyclopedia. It was an illness with an unknown cause, but the most common theory was that it was a black magic curse. Black butterfly-shaped marks appeared on the body. When all 4 wings turned completely black, death followed. To this day, there is no cure. Looking at the mark on her body, Daphne asked if they meant only half of it had turned black. She asked them seriously. She knew it took all 4 wings to darken before death. So why had she died so early? As expected, the maids had no answer. They were confused too. One couldn't remember anything clearly, and the other only said that her lady's condition had suddenly taken a turn for the worse. Little Daphne found it strange. How could the maids who panicked over a single cough completely forget how or why she died? Later, back in her room, the princess had too much on her mind. She knew this body had already been dead before she possessed it, and she began to wonder, what if someone had killed her and erased everyone's memories? The only ones capable of something like this were black mages. There was a very high chance this had been their doing. Daphne instantly realized that this body had been their real target. She asked the maid if, by any chance, anyone outside the mansion knew she had woken up. The maid answered sadly that His Excellency believed she might pass away again, so he ordered everyone to keep quiet about it for now. Irritated, Daphne thought to herself, that guy really has a foul mouth. Still, she was actually happy about this. Since the black mages didn't know she was alive, she wouldn't have to worry about assassins for a while. Even so, she felt the Duke's intentions were impure no matter how she looked at it. Seeing how furious her lady was while throwing tantrums, the maid quickly tried to reassure her. She said they had already hired a new physician, a very skilled one. He was an elven doctor from the Inshina Mountains, Tatey. As Dr. Tatey entered the ducal manor, he was deeply impressed. He muttered that the trip to the capital had been worth all the trouble. This man looks like he's here to profit from the household situation. In his heart, he laughed. He thought rich nobles of the capital were easy targets. After all, this disease is incurable, but with enough money offered, he could pretend to try, and if they pressured him too much to cure it, he would simply run away. Since the patient was just a child, he planned to get on her good side and squeeze as much money out of the family as possible. Poor man, he doesn't know he's dealing with a noble brat. He might leave with nothing in the end. The moment he opened the door to her room, Dr. Tatey froze. A terrifying aura washed over him. His heart raced as he wondered why this energy felt so familiar. He realized it had been 50 years since he'd last felt something like this, and even then he had never seen its source. Has my sense gone dull? He wondered nervously. He announced his arrival and stepped in, but when he saw little Daphne calmly staring at him and saying she had been waiting for him, he slammed the door shut. Did he just shut the door in her lady's face? This will not end well. Dr. K.E. knew instantly the Calamity Black Dragon was back. Sweat poured down his face as shock took over. His mind screamed in confusion. Why was this insane dragon here? Moments later, he was dragged back into the room and forced to kneel before her. Daphne looked down at him and asked if he knew who she was. Trembling, he answered immediately, "Yes, of course. You are the great Master Selus, are you not?" He praised her endlessly, saying her overwhelming spirit aura could be felt even from another continent. Only the almighty Selus could admit such terrifying power. Little Daphne sat proudly like an almighty, listening to his praise. She said he looked like a promising brat after all, then asked if he was the doctor assigned to this body. He quickly nodded, addressing her as Master Selus. She corrected him calmly. Since the body belonged to Daphne, he was to call her Daphne from now on. "I understand, Master Daphne," he replied immediately. Unable to hold back his curiosity, Dr. Tae asked why a great dragon like her was inside a human body. To hide shame, little Daphne replied that it was simply for fun. Excited, Dr. Tae told her that aside from elves, there were no humans who could sense her energy like this. Daphne cut straight to the point. Since he already knew this body was afflicted with an incurable black butterfly disease, he was to find a cure for it. Dr. Tae froze in shock and asked carefully if she truly meant the black butterfly disease. "Are you sure you're not mistaken?" he asked. Daphne looked at him with a serious face and replied coldly, asking if he had ever seen the great dragon make a mistake before. The doctor quickly explained that the black butterfly was not an illness at all. It was a black magic curse. That meant there was no cure. What she needed was a way to break the curse. Daphne was stunned. A curse? She asked why this body was cursed at such a young age, and what terrible offense it could have possibly committed. Scratching his head, the doctor answered honestly that the body had done nothing wrong. Instead, it was the hero. He pointed toward the family crest hanging on the wall and began to explain an old saying, "The rising sun has swallowed the setting night." He spoke of how the dark night cried out to the gods, feeling deeply wronged. He had only retreated from the sun's light, so why does he seek to take his life? Filled with rage, the knight swore revenge with its own blood, vowing that one day the light would no longer be able to shine. The doctor explained that the sun represented the hero, while the knight symbolized the black mages. He told Princess Daphne that the hero, Heros Akion, had slaughtered the black mages and was cursed as a result. The curse was meant to prevent the Akion family from continuing their bloodline. Furious, little Daphne demanded to know why her body was the only one cursed when the Duke had other children. With a small smirk, the doctor replied that she must have entered this body without knowing much. Our girl narrowed her eyes and asked if he was mocking her, but he quickly denied it. The hero had 4 children in total. The first son was Lace, the second was Viper, the third was Arius. All 3 were adopted. The only biological child was Princess Daphne. Her mind went blank. "So this body was cursed because of the hero?" she yelled, losing her composure. "And now I'm about to die too?" "That is correct," the doctor replied calmly. "Wow, you're kidding me," little Daphne snapped, "and he hasn't even come to visit me once?" The doctor said that was to be expected. After all, the hero disliked her. Poor girl. She demanded to know why. He explained that the hero's wife had died while giving birth to her. Enraged, little Daphne asked if that was really all. She shouted that she was cursed from the moment she was born, dying because of someone else's sins, and they still had the nerve to hate her after bringing her into this world. The doctor nodded in agreement and said quietly that humans were truly selfish creatures. That was the last straw. Little Daphne ordered the elf to open the door. With a deadly serious face, our girl stomped her feet and shouted, "Let's go beat that beast-like hero." The retainers of the duchy had never been fond of Heros. They were true nobles who had sworn loyalty to the Akion house long before him. Heros was an illegitimate child, and if he had not become the strongest swordmaster or earned the title of hero, then no matter how desperate the house was for an heir, he would never have inherited the title of duke. Still, the retainers never truly accepted him as their master. At the council meeting, the imperial count once again opposed every decision Heros made. With a stiff expression, he questioned the duke directly. Even during a famine, how could you open the granaries to commoners? He asked coldly. The Duke stood with his arms folded, watching him quietly. The nobles demanded to know why he wanted to waste the duchy's treasury to feed peasants. They insisted that feeding the commoners was the emperor's duty. Marquis Garon, a close aide of Heros, spoke up. He asked what the count planned to do if the citizens starved to death, especially when half of the land was made up of harsh mountains and the rest was scorched by drought. What choice did the villagers have? Unmoved, the count replied that they could go into the mountains and dig up roots to eat. If they were devoured by beasts along the way, then perhaps that was simply their fate. Garon shouted the count's name angrily, but the man remained unmoved. People like this are very selfish. The count claimed he understood the intention of preserving the population of the domain, but insisted that now was not the right time. With a stern face, he warned his grace that no matter how much he wished to save common lives, there were limits, even for someone like him. The Duke's knight nearly spoke out in anger. In his mind, he recognized the insult for what it was, a sarcastic jab at the Duke's childhood spent living on the streets. Before anyone else could react, the Duke spoke sharply. He reminded them how the young heir of Marquis Isaac once held a grand engagement ceremony and how the so-called lowly and impatient peasants burned the entire estate because of the noble's excesses. The room fell silent. The Duke asked if they understood his point. Just as the matter was about to be concluded, the Count tightened his grip on the documents in his hands. Then the doors burst open. It was the angry princess. Daphne stormed into the council chamber, her presence instantly throwing the room into confusion. Dr. Tatey peeked nervously from behind the door, trying to call her back, but she ignored him and marched forward. "It's been a while, hero," Daphne said fiercely. One of the counts stared at her in disbelief, but Daphne's eyes were fixed on the Duke. The room erupted into murmurs. No one could believe that this was the young lady of the house. Before anyone could stop her, little Daphne grabbed a teacup and hurled it toward the Duke. It missed him and smashed loudly against the wall. Everyone froze. Her father looked at her with a serious but calm face and asked the meaning of the sudden drama. Little Daphne climbed the table, shouting for his grace and declaring that he had given birth to her on a whim. Crawling forward, she angrily told him that she had been cursed too, because of him. Now standing in front of him, she yelled, demanding to know why he couldn't even pretend to act like a father. "Isn't that cruel?" she shouted. With a faint smirk, the Duke asked if she thought this was the right time to nag. Pissed, she told him that he didn't deserve her nagging. She stumped her feet furiously and announced that she had come to declare war. Immediately, she jumped up to strike him with the painting pen, but he caught her instantly. Mad, she shouted that she would not die and that she would survive just to kill him. After all the drama, the meeting room was left almost empty, with only a few of his master's men remaining. The Duke sat quietly, lost in thought, while his men murmured among themselves, noting that it seemed he wasn't angry. Gairon thought to himself that his grace couldn't really get angry. The curse of the dark sorcerer had stripped him of emotions, but that didn't mean he wasn't thinking. And right now, he was thinking of the princess. The only remaining blood of Akion, born at the cost of her mother's life, yet cursed with a fate destined for an early death. She had always been in pain, lashing out and striking servants in fits of rage. Because of this, the hero had moved her to a separate residence. Everyone assumed she would quietly die, but she had returned from the brink, causing utter chaos. Staring out the window, Gairon guessed that life wouldn't be so boring in his old age after all. Outside, our girl laughed happily, enjoying every moment. Even though she hadn't received the reaction she expected, at least she had declared war. Tatey called out, asking if he could leave now. Young man is clearly trying to run from our little miss. She turned coldly toward him. "Are you trying to run away from me?" Caught off guard, he immediately shouted, "No!" He added hastily that he would devote his life to her, but he had other contracts to attend, and sadly, she didn't even need his treatment. She snapped, saying he talked too much, and he quickly agreed to be quiet. Exhausted, Taiti followed her as she ranted about how she hadn't died from the curse, but had been murdered by someone out there. His eyes widened in shock. "Murdered," he repeated. Panicking, he asked if she was trying to get him to find her murderer. He told her he could only connect her to a guard. Beyond that, there was nothing he could do. Daphne calmly told him not to jump to conclusions. Relieved, he smiled happily, saying he knew she was far too gracious to burden a mere servant like him. Ha! Young man is trying to sweet-talk his way out. She immediately told him to prepare a portion for her, a potion to regain her strength and slow the curse. He raised his medicinal kits and reminded her that he was a healer, not a pharmacist. Our princess clenched her fists in anger. "Are you refusing me?" Nervously, he laughed and agreed that he would act as her pharmacist. She grumbled about how hard it was to change majors this late. Then, calling him a good boy, she smiled and said, "Now it's time to get stronger." The maid started to notice sudden changes in little Daphne. Before, she would get angry at the smallest thing they did, but now it was different. Since she woke up, not a single thing had been broken, and she spoke strangely, almost like an old woman. Earlier, they had caught her stretching and muttering, "Kids these days are a bit too stiff." That was odd. Isn't she a child, too? They also found it strange that she told them not to follow her and had gone to the training grounds alone. Maybe she's training to catch His Majesty's attention, one maid suggested. The other shook her head. The other day, she tried to find the hero in the middle of a meeting, and earlier she overheard the princess mumbling about revenge against Master Hero. Both maids completely misunderstood our little miss. They assumed she only wanted her father's approval, so at least they decided to make her some snacks. At the training grounds, little Daphne muttered to herself, pleased that no one was there to disturb her. She sat down with her legs crossed and tried to form mana for the first time. "There's no way I have 0 mana," she thought. "Maybe it's blocked because of the curse. It has to be somewhere inside." Our girl decided to draw out the dragon power in her soul using the mana stone that Tati had helped her channel yesterday. Others might freak out if they saw this method, she thought. Holding the mana-infused stone in her hands, she hoped that swallowing it would finally unlock her power. Suddenly, a wave of pain surged through her body and she gasped. "Has it always been this excruciating?" She gritted her teeth, trying to control herself. "I need to get a grip. Focus." She tightened her grip on her clothes, struggling against the pain. "Guide the swirling mana in my chest slowly through the blocked veins. Don't rush," she whispered in her mind. Almost there, when suddenly she felt nauseous, and then boom, a black fluid spurted out. Immediately, her stats appeared in front of her. Mana, 1. It worked! Her eyes lit up, exhausted but very happy. "If I keep this up, my magic power will grow." She giggled excitedly, calling herself amazing for finally achieving this. Then she glanced at the black fluid and frowned. A mark of the curse. How nasty. Carefully, she packed it into a vase, deciding to ask Tati to look into it later. This doesn't feel like a curse from killing a dark mage, she thought. But for now, as long as she builds magic and swallows the hero family, nothing else matters. Suddenly, someone smacked her on the back of the head. She spun around angrily. "Who dares?" "Hey," a voice called. Oops, I pity the one to cross paths with her trouble at this point. A young man stood there, hands folded. "What are you doing at the training grounds?" It was one of the Duke's adopted children. He frowned, calling her bad luck and ordering her to leave immediately. Daphne turned to see Heros, the second son of Akion dukedom. Daphne asked, "Is that all you've got?" She promised that she would make his death his last words. Heros was surprised. "You've really changed," he said. His eyes scanned her outfit. "What's with that look? Have you been training or something?" Then, coldly, he added that no matter how much she struggled, she would still die. So just go lock yourself in your room and continue harassing the maids like before. That's literally what she's good at anyways. Daphne's eyes narrowed. If that's what she's good at, then she'll start by hitting him first. Before he could react, she landed a sharp blow on his cheek. Heros froze in shock. He fell to the ground, glancing at her in amazement. "Did you just hit me?" he asked. Little Daphne sharply said he hit her face first, so it's only right to hit back. "How could you hit your own brother?" he protested, holding his cheek almost in tears. "I've never had such a rude brother before," Daphne yelled. She thought angrily to herself. Long ago, she hadn't even known how a death god was born. She had lived alone for so long that she began to wonder what a family even was. So, well disguised as a mortal, she secretly observed human households. What she saw was clear. Family meant that no matter how they fought, they still shared meals together. No matter how angry they were, they never ignored each other. Even if they sulked, they came back to reconcile. They were literally a community that cherished each other. She turned to Heros, who was fuming. "If you were my family," she said coldly, "you would have been there when I was between life and death, but you never came once, so how can you be my brother? Don't bother coming to see me again." He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You're from the Akion family," he snapped, pointing at her forehead. "Get a grip, you half-wit. This boy really needs to get beaten up." "You're a disgrace," he continued, but before he could finish telling her to get lost, Daphne bit his finger. "Crazy!" Arius exclaimed, shocked, and asked if she's seriously picking a fight. Daphne smiled mischievously. "I doubt someone who always gets bitten can do anything." On hearing that, Arius raised his hand to strike her, but suddenly the Knight Commander yelled, "What's going on here?" Both turned toward him. Arius wondered, why did he come at a time like this? Little Daphne crossed her arms. "Who the heck is that?" Arius glanced at her surprised. "Have you forgotten the Knight Commander too?" Daphne sighed. "Why is he coming here to rile things up?" "He's here because we're fighting," Arius reminded her. "We're not fighting," Daphne corrected sharply. "He's the one getting beaten up." Arius flared with anger. "Enough!" Lloyd shouted, stepping between them. Little Daphne frowned. She should have landed one more blow before they got separated. Lloyd asked, "Why are they fighting on sacred ground without drawing swords?" Daphne was surprised. Then, before they knew it, the commander tossed 2 wooden swords in front of them. "You should fight properly," he said. Daphne couldn't believe it. He just gave them wooden swords to continue. "This household is messed up," she thought. Arius, however, was happy. He would be facing someone who couldn't even hold a sword properly. It would be much fun, he thought. Holding the sword, little Daphne called him stupid, saying he wasn't even fit to be her brother. How could he be so excited to fight his little one? Arius yelled, "What did you just say?" But she just smirked. "You're being noisy. Come at me already." Lloyd, standing quietly in the corner, watched them. He began to regret his decision. Maybe he had gone too far by giving them swords to fight. But then he reminded himself, recently the young lady's behavior had gone wild. She didn't just take out her frustration on the maids because of her curse, she had barged into the Duke's meeting and even tried to harm him. On top of that, she had been coming to the training grounds alone. It was better, Lloyd decided, to let the young master teach her a lesson. After all, no one could stop her because of the Duke's orders, but he also knew Arius would go lightly on her because of his warm heart. Other knights began to gather, curious to watch the fight. Lloyd, still lost in thought, was shocked by what he saw. He couldn't believe that the young lady who had never learned swordsmanship before was holding such a good stance. Decades ago, Selus had disguised herself and met an old man in the mountains. She had played with the man's sword, even mocking him, not knowing he was a sword master. The man had struck her on the head, saying that even if she was a dragon, she shouldn't treat the sword so carelessly. Selus was shocked. She couldn't believe the old man had struck her. It was literally her first. The old man suggested he teach her swordsmanship, saying maybe that way she would learn to respect swords. At first, she thought she didn't need to learn, but seeing how determined the man was, she decided to learn swordsmanship. It wasn't easy. She had to endure constant commands from a mere mortal, being pushed through various suffering in the name of training. "Is that all a dragon has got?" the old swordmaster would say repeatedly. Selus had to keep pushing herself. Eventually, she broke out, claiming that she had become a swordmaster like him. The man only sighed and called her a greedy little lizard. "You still have another 100 years to learn," he said. Selus couldn't believe he was treating a dragon like this. The man urged her to rise. He wanted to see a stubborn little reptile like her truly become a swordmaster. Selus had never hated those moments. Even through the sweat and hardships, it had been worth it because she was with someone who didn't hate her. It had been more enjoyable than she had ever imagined. After a year of training, she went to see the old swordmaster as usual. She found him lying down, and thinking he was still asleep, she jumped over excitedly. She grabbed his hand to tell him she had become an expert knight, only to have her eyes widen in shock. He was dead. As expected, human lifespans were far shorter than hers. He was truly gone. Looking out the window, she lamented. He had always said he would live to watch her become a swordmaster, and now he was gone before seeing her succeed. For the first time, tears rolled down Selus's cheeks. She didn't even know his name, and he never got to see her become a sword master. After that, she never went down to the human world again. He never got to understand what flowed that night. But one thing was clear. After burying the old man, she realized she was truly a lonely being. She would visit his grave, bringing flowers too. Since then, she secluded herself in the mountains, devoting herself to sword training to forget the memories of that human. She trained until her cheeks stopped wetting with tears, pushing herself to grow stronger. Now, hearing Heros claim that she had never held a sword, she could only laugh at his stupidity. She raised her sword and struck, asking, "How dare you?" Heros was surprised when she fiercely called him a foolish human, warning him not to underestimate her. Their swords clashed with a sharp ring. The duel had begun. Heros couldn't believe it. She had a flawless stance and powerful strikes. But Daphne had one weakness. She slumped to the ground just as the fight was getting interesting, leaving everyone shocked. Lying there, our girl thought bitterly that her stupid body had exhausted itself. Heros was still stunned. How could his little sister do that, he thought, calling out to his captain. Did I just see that right? Lloyd was equally shocked. Did you see that little kid swing a sword so perfectly, he yelled. Bitterly, he thought, she's never held a sword before, yet she's better than him, even after 3 years of training. Poor boy. That must hurt. Looking down at Daphne on the ground, he wondered if it was because of the special bloodline. He had worked so hard, yet she surpassed him with ease. Clenching his sword, he yelled at the captain to call a physician immediately. Lloyd carried the young lady to her room, while Heros added firmly that starting today, she was his personal trainee. He refused to be overtaken by that brat. Once inside her room, the maids asked if she was feeling dizzy. Instantly, she regained her strength. They even brought fragile items, asking if she felt the urge to break anything. She waved them off and told them to get everything out of her face. The maids murmured among themselves, while little Daphne lost herself in thought. She had actually fainted from a single slash. What am I supposed to do to build my stamina, she wondered. As a dragon, she never needed to train. Everything had always been strong. She thought about who to ask for help. Just then, one maid reminded her that the Knight Commander wanted to see her once she was awake. The psycho, she thought. She didn't like him much, but if he wanted to see her, she had no choice but to grant his request. Perfect, she thought. As commander, he should be one of the strongest humans, right? Little Daphne agreed to meet him, and of course, he arrived immediately. Everywhere was quiet when he first stepped in. Her lady broke the silence. "Why have you come to see me?" Lloyd told her he needed to confirm something. "Have you learned swordsmanship before?" he asked. She replied honestly, "I haven't, because the body truly hadn't." Lloyd was amazed. "You're a natural," he said. He asked if she intended to learn swordsmanship from now on. Little Daphne replied that she would, if not for one problem, reminding him that her body collapsed from exhaustion after a single slash. She then asked if he knew a way to increase stamina. Lloyd explained that raising stamina was simple. All she had to do was run, but he warned her it could also be dangerous for her fragile body. "You're like a blooming flower in a cracked vase," he said. "It's a pity you could have succeeded your master." Lloyd rose, bowed, and took his leave, slamming the door behind him. Little Daphne grabbed the sheets angrily, muttering to herself, "How dare he say that?" she fumed, thinking he must be mad to compare her to some mere hero. Our girl gritted her teeth in fury. Does he think she's going through all this suffering just to follow some hero's footsteps? No, she's not here to succeed the hero. She's here to surpass that bastard, even if this body shatters in the attempt. The next day, our girl began her stamina training. The maid complained, saying she might collapse at this rate, since this was literally her third lap. Her lady yelled at her to cease the noise already. She was struggling. Just like Lloyd said, running was effective. Of course, on the first day, she collapsed and couldn't finish half a lap, but she couldn't stop because she had now confirmed that her stamina was rising. Even when Heros asked her to stop running because her maid looked like they would cry, she threatened him, saying one more word from him and she'd run 10 more laps, as if she could last that long. In half a month, she achieved 30 stamina and 4 strength. She was so excited that she smiled to herself, saying at this rate she would succeed in her revenge. She remembered the medicine Tahiti had given her and thought to herself that it must have really helped. Just then, someone called out from behind. It was Lloyd. He asked if she was aware she had been running for half a month. She growled angrily, asking him to avoid her because she was tired. He chuckled, saying he was only saying it because she was remarkable. Little Daphne wondered why he was being so friendly. He told her lady that he was grateful because the knight's morale had risen greatly since she arrived. Her lady asked how that had anything to do with her. He explained that the other knights, seeing a frail young lady train, were motivated to train with their healthy bodies. Just then, her lady actually noticed. When she usually came here earlier, there wasn't always anyone, but now the number of people has increased. Our girl told him they should take care of themselves, with or without her. Lloyd chuckled, then suddenly asked her lady if she really wished to become stronger. She couldn't believe he was asking such an obvious question. She asked, "Why else would I be doing this?" Lloyd told her that only a few in the estate knew she was cursed, because even Arius thought she just had an incurable disease, so she would continue to suffer this pain without anyone understanding. Lloyd knelt before her, pleading with her to continue and not give up. He thought to himself that this was actually rude to say to Lady Daphne, who was fated to die, but he truly wanted her to overcome it. "You do go on with your nonsense," she said, and he was surprised that she just called it nonsense. Her lady told him she would become stronger, just like she had said, and she fiercely told him she was a great being who didn't know the word surrender. After 16 laps instead of 20, she collapsed to the ground, wondering if she should actually give up. Immediately, a wooden sword landed in front of her. It was Arius. He stood before her saying there was no way he would let her collapse without both of them having a duel. He reminded her that they didn't get to finish last time. Little Daphne only stared at him like the fool that he was. "I refuse!" she shouted. He was shocked. "Why?" She yelled that she wasn't in the state. "You know my stamina, and yet you ask for a fight?" She laid flat, adding that she was exhausted and had no energy to entertain his stubbornness. Arius told her sadly that her body had gotten better than before. Looking at him, she thought to herself that it had gotten better, but not to the point it would be outwardly visible to an 8-year-old boy. Daphne told him it was true she had improved, but she was still a long way from being strong. She pointed at Lloyd, asking him to duel with Arius instead, but he yelled that it had to be her. Daphne yelled back that it wasn't with her. Arius gritted his teeth and suddenly exploded in anger, saying he just wanted to see her stance again. Hoops, poor boy is still traumatized seeing her better than him last time. Little Daphne smirked as she finally understood what was going on. Look at this little rascal. So that's what this is about. He tried to deny it, but she sighed, teasing. If he wanted, she would teach him. He didn't have to throw a tantrum like this. Go on, say it. Ask me to teach you. She rose to her feet, a mischievous glint in her eyes. But Arius frowned, insisting there was nothing to learn from her. "Then I suppose you'll swing that sword terribly for the rest of your life." The words hit him like an arrow. "They say one must fix their mistakes when they're young. If you don't wish to learn, you'll stay messed up," her lady added. Fuming, Arius finally asked her to help. "I can't hear you," she said playfully, glancing at him knowingly. "I get it. Help me," he yelled, warning her not to go back on her word later. Little Daphne chuckled. She would be serious with his training as an adult. He had nothing to worry about. He was older, but she didn't care. She had plans, and she intended to see them through. Training began immediately. Our girl corrected every move, insisting he stand straighter, move cleaner, focus harder. "Are you an idiot? Can't you just understand simple instructions? How do you expect me to copy perfectly just by listening? Stop talking and show me. Swing that sword and I'll learn." She smiled. He made sense. She had rested, recovered some strength, and now her stamina could handle swinging. She assumed her stance, swinging her sword with fierce precision. Every motion was perfect, flawless. He watched, eyes wide, amazed. How could a mere child wield a sword like that? Such overwhelming power, such natural skill. It could only be in her blood. Even lacking talent himself, he realized effort and guidance could allow him to grow. Maybe someday he could be like her. Amazed, he watched, until she coughed up blood and collapsed. "Call a doctor! Are you okay?" She struggled, insisting she was fine. Why now? Then she remembered Titi mentioning side effects of the medicine was just something minor, depending on her condition. Mild indigestion, he had called it, but now the truth was far worse, and she cursed him silently. Back in her room, pale and lying on the bed, she thought she was used to fainting and waking up by now. She gritted her teeth. She needed to catch that foolish elf. Then her eyes widened, her hands moved, and she felt refreshed. Her health stats appeared. 50, an increase of 20. She could hardly believe it. Looks like Tay-Tay isn't a quack after all. She got dressed happily. Time to start training again to strengthen her body. Nothing could stop her. Entering the training ground, knights tried to stop her. You may not train anymore. She confronted them. You can't just tell me what to do. How can you train after collapsing yesterday? Overworking will make it happen again, they warned. None of your concern. Move aside, she snapped. Her murderous glare froze them. They bowed immediately, whispering among themselves. She'll only pass after we're dead, one muttered nervously. This is probably how we die. Another smacked him. It's the only way she might reconsider her health. Is that your wish? She demanded, eyes blazing. Sword in hand, she smiled mischievously. Don't worry, I'll make it painless. They prepared themselves for death, trembling, until a voice came from behind. Have you decided to disobey the Count's order? It was Knight Commander Lloyd. Is he supporting her lady in this situation? This little girl literally passed out yesterday and you are in support of her training again the next day? Come on. This is where this part of the story ends. If you love the story and you want us to continue, please comment the protagonist name, Daphne.